Hey Gary, well I guess I'll start right at the end of your video by saying that I don't think that there's a pre-given destination or goal out there in the future ahead of evolution that's drawing us towards it. Um, I wouldn't say that. We are definitely constrained by the past, and so there are only a certain number of possibilities open to us, but we do have the ability to move in one of those possible directions um, freely or creatively. And when we do move in that direction, all of a sudden there's a whole bunch of new possibilities that open up. So nothing is determined, in other words. It's not that it's predetermined, that's still a form of determinism. I'm saying reality is open ended. There are causes from the past that constrain the ends that it can open, but um, there's always an array of possibilities, and each time um, we continue to act in the world, we open up new possibilities while closing others. So you can never tell where this thing is going. Um, but that's not to say it's random. So it's not determined by some future goal or by the past, but it's not random either. There does seem to be some intention to it. And then now I guess we can go to your distinction between thinking and feeling, or philosophy and psychology. Um, and you kind of admit that feeling is, quote, the hidden nature of consciousness, whereas thinking is something artificial. It's logical. We can build a computer that thinks um, conceptually, but we just don't understand feeling. And I couldn't agree more. Feeling is really what throws a wrench into the idea of artificial experience, because we can say artificial intelligence and say, well, it's a thinking computer that only deals in concepts but doesn't feel, so it's not really conscious then. Um, but so what are feelings? And to understand feelings, I think, yeah, we could say that it's an arrangement of neurons, but really, it's the arrangement of neurons is what you mean by a thought. Um, a particular uh, pattern of firing neurons could be considered a concept or an idea, right? And it matches, is isomorphic to some state of factual affairs in the world that we are cognitively conscious of, that we think about rationally, or however you want to put it. But that doesn't tell us anything about the feeling behind it or the conscious experience of having that thought. So to talk about consciousness as though it's a particular arrangement of neurons that is created out of nothing by the complexity of that arrangement doesn't tell us anything. It tells us how there could be thought, but not feeling. It tells us how we could have learning and behavior that from the outside looked intelligent, but it doesn't tell you where the feeling came from. So, in order to, elucidate how this feeling exists in the first place, that's where I go to atoms and say, well, at the most basic level of the movement of matter and energy through space-time, there must be some kind of an urge or a tendency. And there is a tendency. It's, at the very least, the second law of thermodynamics, which says that energy seeks equilibrium. But because the universe began as a singularity, um, as it falls down, due to certain quantum fluctuations, a gradient developed, and in that gradient, to return to equilibrium faster, there have been certain emergent thermodynamic systems that are open thermodynamic systems that complexify themselves, like atoms and stars and higher elements as a result of stars that condense into planets orbiting stars, and on those planets molecules form, which then somehow get cooked up into these cellular self-producing systems that then couple with other cellular self-producing systems into multicellular organisms with neurons and nervous systems that can do the crazy things that organisms like us can do. But without attributing some kind of intention or tendency or sentience, directional pull to matter itself, to the very fundamental substances or particles that make up matter and energy, then I don't see how we can ever arrive at feeling in a complex organism like ourselves. Certainly, we could understand how behavior got more complex, how thinking, our ability to think increased, but we can't explain our ability to be conscious of those thoughts or feelings based on a kind of reductionism or neuroscience that you're talking about. Understanding how the brain works down to the smallest molecular detail isn't ever going to tell you necessarily what makes it conscious. If you want to know what makes it conscious, you have to explore your own experience, because that's what consciousness is. It's not something in someone else's brain that you're going to find. You have to find it within, which is why it all sounds so phantasmagorical. But if you're going to understand feeling, your only access to it is through your feeling. But the thing is, I think you can do philosophy by admitting that you have feelings, because you recognize that your real body is not contained here as your individual person, but is really the world itself. The other people that you're, immersed in this community with, but also the ecosystem that you're immersed in, the whole planet, the Gaian ecosystem. If the atmosphere is a product of the relationship between various species of bacteria and the oceans and plants on the land, then those bacteria and plants are your lungs for all intents and purposes. So you are a part of that organism, that larger feeling entity. And so to admit feeling into your philosophy isn't to start projecting your own personal emotional attachments onto something that should be objective. No, you know of the objectivity of the world, that there does exist a world out there independently of you and other people independently of you, by feeling it. Without feeling it, you wouldn't know. You'd have only the structure of your neurons and the thoughts that they represent. So I almost think that to be an objectivist, you need to say that feeling is the most fundamental property of existence, because without your ability to feel that which is outside yourself, without your ability to sense, you could never know what was objective. So feeling, talking about subjectivity in philosophy or psychology while doing philosophy is necessary. Without an emotion, there's no direction for your thought. It'd just be aimless. You need an emotion attached to it, or it leads nowhere. So you can't just say that we're biological machines. If you admit that there is such a thing as feeling, then there's something different about an organism than a machine. Namely, the organism has feeling. About taking a body apart, yeah, we can lower the temperature of the body and remove an organ, hook our blood vessels up to an artificial machine that pumps it for us. But you know what I'm meaning to say, Gary, that you can't, chop up a body into various components, let it sit there for a little bit, and then reattach them all and expect the person to come back to life. I could take apart my MacBook into many small pieces and then put it back together a month later, and it would work fine as long as I didn't damage any of them. So that's the difference I'm talking about. But I guess I'm running out of time, so let me know what you think.